Quick audio check, nice and clear. Thank you. We're about 1 minute to roll out. Just rolling the commercials. All right. Good morning, everybody. We are here on the pier. We are about 20 seconds to leaving the pen here. It is going to be a nice, steady pace of 1.8 watts per kilogram. I'm going to get everybody grouped up here. We're going to get everyone rolled out, and we're going to have a good time. Let's see. Send those shares out to our affiliates. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Jason Flores. I'm a writer for Team ODZ and a broadcaster host for Zwift Live by ODZ. Before we get started, I could actually make a couple announcements. We do have a really amazing ride. The next installment of the ODIVA's Ladies Race is actually happening tomorrow. So definitely tune in for that. It's very close to the same time window. We're looking at around 5 a.m. Pacific time. Always a fun race to commentate for, and always a fun race to watch as a spectator. So definitely tune into that if you are on. It'll also be available for replay per usual. But let's get started on our topic today. Let me just get all of our slides up and ready, and we'll make this happen. Head on over. Pace looks good. Group looks good. Nice and steady. 1.8 watts per kilogram. Thanks for hanging out, guys. All right, well, let's get started. Again, welcome to In the Feedzone. We are on Fridays at 5:45 Pacific, 8:45 Eastern, and 13:45 GMT. My name is Jason Flores, aka JFlow here on Zwift. You can find me riding around, usually doing workouts or doing the long rides on the weekend. So definitely check any of those Team ODZ rides out if you have the chance. One quick reminder that this live stream is for informational purposes only, and its stream is to educate and to inform, and it's not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or any other qualified medical professional. Live stream is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or professional advice or services. So the goals today is to present current articles in the media covering food, hydration, and how it relates to endurance, and opening a dialogue for viewers to ask questions to get advice about their experiences. All right, so on to our topic for today. So we are looking, expanding kind of our talk from last week and a couple weeks previous, episode 4, I believe, about hydration on the bike, and a couple new things that have come out, and a really great article that has come out by Nate Dunn. He's one of the contributing speakers and coaches for What's Up with Power that Team ODZ and Zwift Live do on Wednesday mornings, and he is from a site called Data Driven Athlete. He's got really great information, so if you have a chance, check out his website. He has got great nutritional things. He's got a great science background, as well as information on training on the bike and how to make things work in that sense. And they covered a great topic on Wednesday on how to break down the data after a ride and kind of how you did on that ride and so forth. So I think that goes good both for Zwift as for our in the real rides on the bike outside too. So a little bit more about our topic. We're going to be talking about staying hydrated on the bike. We're going to talk about a couple different ideas as far as science is concerned about maybe the history of what we've kind of thought and what we can think about moving forward. One is a thought about drinking to maximum tolerance. One is to drink to thirst. One is to prescribed drinking, a prescribed amount. One idea about how dehydration actually during an event is actually okay, it's fine. And then a little bit about how the research seems to be conflicting at this time. We'll try to put it all together in one neat little bow, and then I will give a couple guidelines about developing things that we could do both here indoors as well as outdoors as we go outside, more as the season changes here in North America. All right, so let's start off by talking about drinking to maximum tolerance. So really early hydration guidelines, and we've all heard this, starting back into the 1980s, about early hydration guidelines have always focused about drinking as much as possible. Drink now, drink this, here's another bottle, here's another fluid, drink as much as you can and fill yourself up. Because there was an idea about dehydration, anytime dehydration approached around 2% or greater, there was an aerobic performance loss. So any event, cycling, running, any of these events where aerobic performance was key, and especially on the bike, you're looking at 90 to 95% of it being aerobic, that we didn't want that decline. And the science was telling us that at that time. But we will also talk about maybe why the science was wrong and what they have found since. But at that time, they were talking about drink it as much as you can, and you could definitely remember those, and those still stick around now. So we'll try to make parts of this. And so the more you drink, essentially the thought was the less fluid that you're losing because you're constantly sweating. You want to replace that constantly, and supposedly the better your performance was. The problem with this is that it can lead to what's called hyponatremia. Really big word, and you probably heard it in the news, but what it is that about the dilution of the sodium levels or salt levels in the blood. So essentially it's taking on so much fluid that the body doesn't have enough other things, potassium, sodium, all those other things to balance it out. And the body can go into really bad spells and can actually has led in some marathon instances has led to some really bad even deaths in the marathon world. So definitely something to look at. And I think from what I've read, this is what's kind of sparked the newer research on making the changes here. So the second idea that we're looking at is staying hydrated on the bike is drinking to thirst. The more recent guidelines have emphasized that an individual each has their own bit amount that they sweat at, as far as their rates and how much electrolyte that they're putting out. So drinking when they're thirsty versus drinking constantly is where it is kind of right now, and transitioning into the newer ideas here as we move forward. So drinking when you're thirsty. The problem with this is, we'll look into that too. A lot of times you may not be able to do that sort of thing, for example, in the middle of a race, but we'll talk how that compares to other ways of hydration here shortly. All right. So the problem with drinking to thirst is sometimes you forget. We've all gotten in into the first hour of a ride, and we're like, wow, we have a full bottle still. We need to get going on hydrating, because you feel so good in that first hour, and then further on you may feel kind of like you're bonking, or that you're really dehydrated and trying to catch up for on a 3-4 hour ride. After the first hour you're behind, it can definitely be difficult. So the problem is it can result in dehydration ranging from anywhere from 1 to 3% of body weight. And so again, performance can decline with as little as 1%, again, from that science. So following your thirst may still slow you down. All right, so the third type of idea of hydration is prescribed drinking. So this aims to minimize this food loss while steering clear of hyponatremia. And so what we're looking at is you weigh yourself before and after a trial ride, and depending on the amount of weight that you lose, you could actually think about how much you can put in. So it's a systematic dose that you can put in evenly throughout a race. Obviously this is really difficult outdoors, having that amount and making sure you're drinking, and but a lot of people do this in the world, let's say triathlon. You could do it actually indoors because we've got all of our facility close by, but a systematic dose can definitely be good, because then you can aim for a certain amount of weight loss of under 1% or 5% or something like that, keeping yourself hydrated, not going over, not going under, like the first two could have put us in that situation. All right, so essentially minimizing fluid loss, sounds great, but again, it may be impractical for many competitive scenarios. So more steady state efforts, Ironman efforts, half Ironman efforts can definitely make the difference. You can have what you need at the aid stations and that sort of thing. So you'll see a lot of Ironman pros kind of doing this sort of prescribed dosing. So then comes the idea is this, is as the science kind of progressed, they did a couple really landmark studies, specifically in the marathon, where they found that dehydration maybe not be such a big deal at all. So the landmark study in 2011 that happened was researchers showed that there was like an inverse relationship, meaning that the riders who finished the fastest were actually the most dehydrated at one of the biggest marathons that they were looking at, or marathons across the board. And so what they were looking at was that the faster they were, the actually more dehydrated they were, and they were outside of the ranges that science was saying that you would be slower. So if in fact they were, over 3% dehydrated or more, but still winning races, did dehydration even matter? And then so this is when the newer talks of figuring out maybe what they're focusing on wasn't the thing that we needed to focus on. So that's something to remember here for the competitive sense of things. So to summarize, the fastest runners in the race were dehydrated the most, and most losing about 3%. So how were they? And so what does this tell us moving forward now? So here, where we can kind of look at where now research is kind of converging and they're actually conflicting as far as what they're saying. So the effective dehydration might have been inflated because of the way it was tested. A lot of times they're indoor settings, whether it be running or on a trainer, and we all know what that feels like. You can definitely sweat more, you can feel more dehydrated in an indoor setting. So definitely something that could be exaggerated. So there's typically can be a disconnect between the hydration research and it could also come down to the placebo effect. And so there was actually another study that was very, very interesting where they actually used intravenous infusion to blind participants if they were being hydrated or not. And so what they did was there was one group that was unknowingly hydrated to around a certain percent, about 0.5% body weight, and then there was ones that were dehydrated to around 3%, but you couldn't tell because both were getting fluids throughout the whole time. And so at the end, both of them performed quite well. And so what they came to a conclusion of was that hydration status may not have mattered as much as it had in the past or that we had focused on. So now, what are we going to look at? So we're going to try to put all this together. We're going to go over all the ones that we have here, the different types of hydration strategies, and what we're going to try to do is parse together what we, moving forward, should actually do moving forward to help ourselves get hydrated. So let me bring this chart up nice and big. Great chart. Nate Dunn does great charts as far as what he puts up on his data-driven athlete blog and site, so definitely check that out. So we've got pros and cons across the top. We're going to go across a little bit of both. We're looking about drinking to tolerance, drinking to thirst, prescribed drinking, and then the idea that dehydration is fine. So again, just to remember, drinking to tolerance, it minimizes fluid loss, potentially decreases the cardiovascular strain or your aerobic capacity. Drinking to thirst minimizes the risk of hyponatremia, but it's a more customized solution to individual sweat rate. And then looking at prescribed drinking, it minimizes fluid loss with lowering the risk of hyponatremia, but it also lowers your thirst over time, which is all positive, and it could also decrease the cardiovascular strain. And then the idea that dehydration is fine, you can concentrate on not drinking, and this tends to be more applicable in race scenarios, and I'll give some time windows that we can kind of look at and remember, and essentially real world application, riders out there that we see, let's say like at the, I just got finished watching the Advent Tour of California. Those guys are coming through the line pretty dehydrated, still hitting it pretty hard, but making sure that they have what they need, but not to an amount where they're trying to kind of fall in one of these things. So again, you're going to need to figure out what works for you. And then going to the cons, the first three are all talking about different dehydration levels. And then the only thing about thinking about dehydration is fine is that idea is that it may be dangerous in hot environments, and it's definitely a complete departure from the established hydration research, which was all focusing on this 1 to 3% dehydration amount being dangerous to us and needing to make sure that we got within that or below that. So let's put this all together, okay? So we need to develop, or at least kind of take all this together and develop practical guidelines. You'll hear everything and anything in the group ride and that sort of thing, but I think it's important, and one of the reasons why we do this for our riders and for the community is so that you can put an idea for yourself of what you want to do looking at the current science. So what we want to do is always make sure that you start your race fully hydrated. So that means hours before, not minutes before, that you're putting in water throughout the day, every day, putting that in and getting that information, getting that hydration in. Also, looking at your high intensity races, means almost everything, almost every ride and race on Zwift is under an hour. And so you don't need to worry about drinking too much in and during your ride, and kind of playing with that and seeing how you feel for different time lengths is going to be important, and something that can easily be tested here in our situation. So even up to high intensity rides, up to an hour, you don't need to worry about drinking too much. So that also goes for even training rides outdoors. So in most scenarios, the idea is to drink when you're thirsty on the bike and don't drink when you're not. Pretty simple. It's kind of a blend of one of the different ways that we talked about prescribed drinking and hydration. For long or hot races, you need to remember to take a little bit of that prescribed drinking approach. So this is where a lot of it comes, where we can maximize some of the things that we've talked about in different streams that we talked about, where we're putting the right amount of, let's say, carbohydrate and salt solution in the bottle, having a guideline of drinking when you are thirsty and trying to remind yourself that, and knowing that a certain amount, let's say anywhere from 16 to 22 ounces in our bottles once an hour, that you should be going through that in about an hour. So it becomes more general guidelines versus prescribed dosing, especially with the type of things that we do. So definitely could be useful in that sense. And getting those things right of what's inside the bottle is really key too, because if you remember, drinking water alone is great to get into the body, but we could definitely add things like salt, as well as a bit of glucose or sugar that can help move the hydration in more efficiently. And so the question is, does this end up mudding everything up and essentially stressing you out and figuring out what you should do? I think in the end, we just need to make sure that we don't really worry about too much about it, but making sure that we have the things that we need on a real ride. You have enough water, you have that extra bottle in case you need it. And if you're starting your ride and you're well hydrated, let's say throughout the day and throughout the days previous, drink when you're thirsty, and most of the time you will be fine. And losing this percentage of points and moving away from this 1 to 3% loss of body weight and getting dehydrated, that idea, I think, is the main 10-foot photo that we want to try to take away and step from, as far as what we're looking at wanting to take away here. So again, kind of let me get back to our main chart here and go over our pros and our cons. So it's kind of a blend, essentially. For me, and what I what I recommend a lot of times, again, I do like the idea of drinking to thirst for endurance sports like we do, especially for those longer rides, but with some guidelines and a little bit of that prescribed amount in there. And then also understanding that dehydration is going to happen in the race situation. And we need to understand that, hey, if I'm a little bit behind because of X, Y, and Z, but I'm drinking to my mental thirst, because your body is going to tell you when you need to drink, I think is important to understand. I definitely am not part of that the population that's doing drink to tolerance, and I do find a lot of riders that, whether I coach or help out, that they drink a lot, a good amount, and we scale that back on. We spend that time during those long zone 2 intervals and long zone 2 rides to see how long they can go, and so that they can almost reprogram themselves to feel like, oh, now I'm thirsty, instead of constant be like, oh, 5 minutes, I got to drink, 10 minutes, I've got to drink. So an alternative to that would be to kind of retrain yourself to be able to feel that you are thirsty, in the same way you want to be able to feel like when you're hungry, or feel how you're doing in a ride. And versus this whole programmed amount, I think is important. So taking those opportunities in kind of a non-threatening way, I guess it would be, on a more easy endurance ride, in a personal zone 2 effort, easier, would allow you to kind of make that longer effort and see how you go through. So for example, let's say you would normally go through 2 bottles in an hour, or 2 bottles an hour. Let's say the next week you go out and you see, okay, well, I'm going to wait to see if I could do 45 minutes, and then, finish up that bottle, and then the next 45 minutes, and you're now at an hour and a half. So definitely trying those things out can be very useful, and getting yourself to kind of trained to like how you feel and how things, your body telling what it needs. It's an amazing thing, and I think we should all take the opportunity, and this can also roll into the conversation of your body knowing when to eat, your body knowing when to burn fat versus carbohydrates, and getting used to burning one or the other. And these all go into kind of a lot of the other training things. But as far as hydration is concerned, I think it's something that we need to look at, and understand these different strategies. So when someone says, oh, I've been told to drink as much as I can, or only drink once in a while, or drink exact amounts, I think each of us are going to have a personal amount that we're going to want to do. And I think it's something that we should come up with, for ourselves, because we definitely are all individuals, and we want to make sure that we know the information. And this slide sums it up really, really well, of the different things that we can do, and that we could positively influence our hydration efforts. So that's all I have today. But definitely check out the Data Driven Athlete website. Let me get to our website here, datadrivenathlete.com. Nate Dunn, great speaker for us at What's Up What Power, and also some really great articles. If anyone's got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer questions. We've got plenty of viewers online. Let me see if anything has come up. There you go. Kwan is awake and commenting, and I've got Pete. Thanks for the hydration strategies there. Yeah. So if anyone has any questions on Discord, I'm more than happy to answer. Otherwise,
hey Jason, I have a comment that might turn into a question, I guess.
Sure.
So I've read some of the same stuff you talked about. Used to be the thought was that you don't want to get dehydrated. It hurts your performance, so people drink a lot more. And now there's contradicting studies. I think there's one thing that there doesn't seem to be a question on, is that severe overhydration is bad.
Yeah.
There's a very serious risk with that. Is that what you understand too?
Yeah. And one of the main front runners in all of that was Timothy Noakes, and he has a great book called Waterlogged. And essentially he goes through the book and talks about the history of there's this marathon in South Africa that they've done, and they used to only have one water station. And then over the years, it's gone from like, and it's a long race. And let's say it was at 25K of a 50K race. And then they end up now every 5K or less, you'll find a water station. And over that time, they found more and more people coming into the medical tent with, this diagnosed of hyponatremia, and nobody knew how to treat it. And they were actually treating it incorrectly. And it actually resulted in some deaths, like I was talking about in the marathon world. And they were baffled that people can just constantly drink. And I think the problem came in is that the people who are having issues were the ones that were doing marathons in 4, 5, 6, 7 hour days, and being told by the media constantly drink. And they were just taking this huge amount of fluid on. So it was something that ended up being very, very dangerous for these riders. But yes, and that's one of the things that, drinking to tolerance and just constantly putting water in. When I see, an article pop up, it's just like, you shake your head. You're like, man, the science is just not right.
Right.
Yeah. Great topic though. But yeah, if anyone has a chance, there's some great excerpts. Timothy Noakes is the writer, and the book is called Waterlogged, and that just came out, I would say, about 2 years ago. And Timothy Noakes is also the same author in South Africa that is pushing for his patients, as well as the country as a whole, to go to a more high-fat, low-carb diet, and finding that diabetes is not necessarily a problem with people needing medication and that sort of thing, but actually essentially a problem with their sugar intake, obviously, but also related to things like high cholesterol and other heart disease, that it wasn't tied as closely as they found before. But in fact, it all is coming down to our sugar intake, and your steady blood sugar throughout a day is what's really controlling that. And he's actually really fighting for that, and he's doing well, and the science studies that he's putting out is very, very strong. I've got a comment from Deirdre Robbins, who just finished the St. Croix 70.3. Congratulations on that. I've tried 2 bottles per hour as a triathlete and found it sloshing in my stomach on the run, and does one bottle an hour. But is that enough? And that's a good question. But what it comes down to is what's inside the bottle for that. So a lot of times you guys are able to carry a good amount on yourself. So the way we kind of think about it is trying to hydrate yourself through your bottle. Getting, like, for example, last week we were talking about the right percent carbohydrate solution in that bottle, Deirdre, and then having food in your pockets, picking it up during transition out of the swim, being able to have that on the bike, whether it be liquid in a super concentrate form that you're mixing with your hydration bottles as you go. Like one could be like the carbohydrate concentration, and then one could be like hydration, so that you could switch off and kind of fill up depending on the length of the ride. Obviously I read Ian's report, and you guys are out there for a good amount of hours, but you have to figure out what works for you. If more solid foods work on the bike, then do that, and then switch over to more liquid foods as you get onto the run, because you are moving. That can definitely be easier because your body and your stomach isn't moving as much as you are on the bike. So really good point there. Okay. Anything else here on Discord? Very good. All right. So thanks for joining us today. I've got some really good topics coming up, but if you guys have any topics, definitely let us know. Drop me a message. I'm always online. Let me know here on Discord. Post up on the post here. If you want me to cover, take a look and see anything, or go over an article. If it crosses your eyes like, hey, I want to hear more about this, I could definitely look into it. So, but thanks everybody for coming. And I will leave you guys with a quick clip from our ODivas ride, which is tomorrow at 5 a.m. It's super interesting race. We've got a lot of ladies getting ready for the CVF World Cup, and we've got a lot of riders that are coming back indoors just for this race, and we always get a really good crowd. So thanks again. This is Jason from In the Feedzone, and check out the ODivas race tomorrow.
Now things are starting to happen as we come up toward this big Caldera finish here. Carol Black and Wright on the front there as well, pushing over the top. Carol has shown her ability to really push it on this climb. Enright comes around holding 6.5 watts per kilo, and that is a tough thing to match. Carol able to match her right now as she climbs up and through this group. Carol is just trying to hang on her wheel. Freestead now 4 seconds behind. Sarah Quinton now 1 second behind. That looks to be your 1, 2, 3 on the podium, although lots can happen. Carol Black with an even bigger push, trying to catch onto the wheel of Enright. Boy, they're getting close to the finish here, and this is going to be a big, exciting finish. Carol Black sees it. She's pushing 10 watts per kilo. She's trying to come around Enright. She's got to do it quick if she's going to do it. Enright trying to hang on to the front of that. Both of them throwing everything they've got at this finish. Carol Black has a chance to come. She's pushing as hard as she can, but she's going to come under this banner in second place. And Enright is going to take it today. The confetti flies, exciting things. Carol Black, second place. Sarah Quinton, third place. Taya Freestead, that fourth spot as well. Another strong finish.